Now from Richard Johnson, he's a lecturer in politics at Queen Mary University of London. And thank you for getting up early too. It is striking to note that Liz Truss's leadership campaign was longer than her leadership of the party. How extraordinary is what we've seen unfold in British politics over the last 24 hours?
We really haven't seen this kind of period of instability in British politics. And, you know, you think of all the different crises that British governments have faced, including war. And, you know, in a way, I was returning back to 1940 when Neville Chamberlain was pushed out and Churchill was brought in to find some kind of analogous political situation. Of course, the crisis facing the country was even greater in 1940 than now. But the sense that the leadership of the day just wasn't up to it. It's fascinating what we're experiencing right now. And the Conservative Party, which was meant to have this reputation for stability, is now a party that is in seemingly endless turmoil.
It's interesting. Some British MPs think that, you know, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson will be in the running, and that seems to be the case. As a unity candidate, I mean, even though, when you think about it, he was thrown out for very specific reasons, could he ever be called a unity candidate? And who else do you think's got a good chance?
I don't think he's the unity candidate among the MPs, but I think that the way that the system has been set up next week means, in my view, he's probably the front runner. If he gets 100 MPs, I think that's his biggest hurdle, but if he gets 100 MPs to nominate him, then, and Rishi Sunak very likely will as well. And I think it could come down to being Boris Johnson versus his former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak. It will then go to a vote of Conservative members online, ending on Friday. And Boris is much more popular with the Conservative members than Rishi Sunak is. In fact, Boris Johnson is probably the most popular candidate among Conservative members. Yeah. So it just seems to me that the setup, whether deliberately or not, it empowers Boris Johnson. And if I were a betting man, he'd be the one I'd be putting my money behind for next week.
It's the extraordinary machinations of politics. As I said, he was just thrown out for, you know, pretty solid reasons, and here he could be coming back in the door. Now, of course, let's talk about these calls for a general election. I mean, it'll soon be a case of 3 prime ministers in a matter of months, 2 of them not elected by the public, 4 finance ministers. At what point does the British public deserve a national election, whether the Conservatives want one or not?
We haven't seen a prime minister change and then another prime minister change within a parliament. We have seen, you know, John Major came in and replaced Margaret Thatcher within a parliament, stayed for a couple of years. Gordon Brown replaced Tony Blair, stayed for 3 years. But to have 2 changes is quite unheard of. I suppose this is the case that the Boris Johnson people will be making, as a sense as, look, you can just admit you made a mistake and go back to our original programme. I don't think the Conservatives are going to be pushing for an election anytime soon because their polling number is so bad. The only way I could see an early election happening is if the Conservatives struggle to get their agenda through Parliament, if they have enough internal rebellions and they struggle even to get, say, a budget through. Well, that's really a matter of confidence in whatever government takes shape. And that would have to precipitate an early general election.
Good point. Yeah, it is interesting for those not in the know, and I suppose it's confusing for people in the UK as well, the Conservative Party system of electing its leader. When you think about it, a minuscule 0.1% of the UK electorate put Liz Truss in number 10. And when it comes to that process, in fact, you tweeted out earlier, quote, idiotic of them to leave this to party members voting online. What if members vote for another candidate who lacks support of most Conservative MPs? How flawed is the system itself in terms of being, you know, unrepresentative of the party, let alone the country?
You know, the thing is, it seems to me that one of the major reasons why we have this turmoil at the moment is because Liz Truss is not trusted by a majority of Conservative MPs. You know, Rishi Sunak was the clear choice among Conservative MPs last time between those two, between him and her, really. But because the members chose Truss, she became leader. And it seems to me that they've just set up the same system again. You know, Boris Johnson could get support of just a third, less than a third of Conservative MPs at the nomination stage. That puts him on the ballot, and then he wins the support of the membership. Yet that doesn't change the fact that possibly more than half of Conservative MPs wouldn't want him to be their leader. But that's what he would end up being. So it's just this constant crisis of legitimacy for the Conservative leader, because it's really important that you have the faith and confidence of your own MPs, because those are the people that you're managing on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely extraordinary times. Richard Johnson, fascinating conversation. Really appreciate you making the time.
Thank you.